Hola gente, ¿cómo están? Estamos aquí en el segundo... ¿Ya me pueden ver? ¿Y ahora sí me escuchan? Ok, hola gente, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos al segundo panel oficial de Twitchella. Yo estoy aquí con solamente 1 hora de sueño, así que es probable que en algún momento me vean trastabillar alguna de las preguntas, pero estoy aquí con Filip Coulianos, que es un amigo de nosotros y un desarrollador de juegos que ha trabajado muchísimo tiempo en la industria, tiene una experiencia súper amplia, ha trabajado en juegos de todo tipo de tamaños. Entonces la idea era como hablar con Filip hoy, hablar de su carrera y ustedes, como hicimos en la mañana, cualquier pregunta que tengan sobre los juegos en los que ha trabajado o sobre cómo ha transcurrido su carrera, la pueden dejar en el chat. Si la pueden highlightear mejor y así es más fácil de ubicar y poder conversar con Filip. Cualquier pregunta está completamente abierta, así que siéntanse en toda la libertad de en el chat va a estar Julio Santamaría, Jules Workshop, lo conocen, él tiene un canal en donde arma model kits y gumplas. Él va a estar en el chat traduciendo las respuestas de Filip para que sepan más o menos qué estamos hablando. Así que estén pendientes a las traducciones que van a hacer en el chat, los que necesiten traducción. Igual las preguntas las pueden mandar en español, nosotros las podemos traducir, no hay ningún problema. Y si en algún momento necesitan que se repita algo, por favor, díganlo en el chat. So, Filip, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
It's an honor to have you back with us. I've actually interviewed Filip in the past, and it's been amazing. And it's one of the funnest videos or it's one of the best experiences I've had doing a video with you.
Wow.
It was very informative, and I learned about the industry with you. And it was a great experience to actually test the game by your side and see your reactions to the bad things that you saw in the game, and also and also like experience like mechanics of the game and everything. But let me just say one thing before in Spanish. Recuerden, gente, ya estamos llegando a la meta de los 2000, que es como la primera meta oficial de las donaciones. Así que durante esta franja pueden seguir donando. Se les agradece un montón. Y justo después de esto, vamos a hacerle raid a Alex, la PGL, que debe estar por aquí en el chat, quien va a estar haciendo una ronda buenísima de Just Dance. Entonces, comencemos. ¿Listos? Okay, I wanted to start like from the beginning. Like, where does your love for game comes from?
Oh, wow. That is actually when I was very, very young. My dad would give me Lego. So it was all about building Lego. To me, that was the ultimate toy. I didn't really understand, like toy cars or, any other things, because to me, Lego was the best thing ever. It was like the more Lego you got, you could just like create more and more complex things with it. So it started with Lego, and then I actually started with pen and paper role-playing games in my early teens, and computer games came with that. And I think it was Half-Life 1 that was the big game for me, the game that sort of made me get really curious about making games as well, where, because on the disc you had the level editor as well. So suddenly you could actually, I was probably 11 at the time, didn't know English that well, but I kind of somehow figured out that this is the editor they use to build the world. And suddenly that was the thing. Suddenly everything else became like not interesting, because now this was like Lego on steroids.
Yeah.
So yeah, like games have always been there, but it started with Lego, and then it was pen and paper role-playing games, and then as we got a computer at home, and specifically Half-Life 1 was the number one game that sort of got me caught into this whole thing. And I was young. I was 11 or 12 at the time, early 2000.
I can like really relate to that. Like, I have my mom was actually like 20 minutes ago, like sending pictures of me and my brother, like when we were really little. Yeah. And there's pictures of me like with clackers and cameras and stuff. Like, I've always been attracted to that. And that brings me to the second question that I wanted to ask you, and is that when and how did you knew that you wanted to make the jump from something that you were passionate about to something that you can make a career out of?
Yeah, I remember that very clearly. Because the thing was, I started making, learn the editor, learning to make levels for Half-Life 1, and Counter-Strike was the big deal back then. So Counter-Strike and then Day of Defeat, all these mods, basically modding for Half-Life 1. And I became involved in a forum, a community, a Swedish level designer community called leveldesign.nu. And that was for amateurs. So we were all, I don't know, 13, 14. And I really got like into that, started writing articles, started becoming really involved, writing reviews for other people's levels and, all that stuff. And then I remember there was this Swedish game developer company called Starbreeze. They made Chronicles of Riddick,
Yeah.
more recently Payday and games like that.
Yes.
They put up an ad. I was 16. Like, we need a level designer, and I was like, holy shit! Is that a thing? You can work with that in Sweden? I had no idea. So I remember sitting at the dinner table, like, Mom, can I apply to? We're like, maybe you should finish high school, son. But then I became very aware of the fact that, like, there are just 5 studios in Sweden. But at that time, I was big. It was so hard to even get a job. I didn't know. So I was very, very, very unsure. Maybe I should do like, engineering or something like that, because we had good education engineering here in Gothenburg, where I was brought up. Then I remember my parents sat me down at a table and had a serious talk. Like, Philip, the only thing you do is sitting by that damn computer. So now you go and study. You go to university and do what you, because I think it was more clear to them than it was for me that, okay, it was the only thing I basically did, but I didn't dare to make the step. So they basically pushed me out the door.
That's so cool.
Right as I was like 17. When you're graduating from high school, it was like, okay, time to apply for university. And luckily, there was a game artist course I could take in a small town about 1.5 hours from Gothenburg.
Wow.
So that's how it went. The definite moment was my parents sat me down and said, okay,
That's so cool how like the pieces just like yeah, like everything just like worked around you starting your career. What would you say? Well, I was going to ask like, how did you get started in the career, like in the industry? Like, I know you went to school, but like, what was your first job, or how did you get into it?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting story actually. So obviously, I started university, and I got a lot of really good friends, and we were like super serious. So we were, teaching each other. The school itself, I mean, it was not the best school for teaching game development. Everything was so new. The teachers hadn't necessarily professionally experienced and so on. But just the fact that, there was a forum for people, like-minded people could together learn, that sort of was the great thing for me. And then I graduated about, I think it was in 2009. So
Okay.
you remember the big economic crash in
Yes.
2008.
Yes.
So that hit Sweden, or the Swedish game industry, about a year later, right as I was, ready to apply, had my portfolio ready, and I already had one friend who was starting to work. And I had been hammering all the studios, applying so many times, and I had almost had like we were about to agree on a time for an interview. So I was ecstatic, and then they were like, "Have you read the news?" And I'm like, "What is he talking about?" Like the guy who was supposed to interview me, he sent me a mail, and then I looked at the news, and it seemed like 2 studios from Sweden had gone bust. Just with a few days in between each other. So suddenly there was, 200 senior game developers on the job market. I'm like, great, I'm screwed. So I moved to Stockholm to study a bit more at a vocational school. So this is not university. And in Sweden, vocational schools is more like the government funds the whole thing, but they have to put 80% of all the students into the relative field. So everyone had to get a job basically,
Oh,
otherwise
okay.
they stop funding the school, which is extremely efficient. It worked really well. So I kind of landed that school, and as I was studying another year, I kept applying to studios here in Stockholm, and that was a bit soul crushing, I have to admit. Even though, like, I remember my teacher and all the people were like, "Why aren't you getting a job?" because clearly, I had confidence, I had a pretty good portfolio, but it was just like the wrong timing,
Yeah.
because all these people, they needed to, get a job first. So I remember I had applied to, DICE, who make Battlefield, for
Yes.
example. They are here in Stockholm. I had applied to them probably 10 or 15 times.
No way.
HR, they knew my name. They knew who I was because I had been applying so many times. And all the other studios, I had like a huge Excel sheet, basically. So where I just kept applying, even though they did not have open positions, I didn't care. I just kept applying whenever I had something new in my portfolio. Or if sometimes, they were looking for someone very senior, and I just applied for that position, pretending I did not read senior.
Uh-huh.
and that actually turned out to work because they realized that I was serious. Like, it was just a matter of time for me to get a job somewhere. So finally, I got an interview at Starbreeze, and that was fantastic. It went very, very well. I got along with everybody right there right away, and then it was just like, from then on, it was very simple. Like, okay, right before summer, so they were like, okay, can you come back and start working in August? I'm like, great. So I had basically a 1 month vacation, let's say, where I knew I was gonna get a job after that. So that was amazing.
And then what was like your first actual experience in the industry? Like, what was the first game you worked in, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the first game was Syndicate, not the old top-down game, but there was
The new one, right? Like
the
the
new
one
one, a
from.
first-person shooter. I think it came out 2012 or 13, somewhere around there. So that was the first game I worked on. And I had been, worked so much with Half-Life or shooters at the time. So for me, it felt quite natural to work on Syndicate. The company was quite shaky at the time. There was like a big restructuring going on. So, but I didn't mind very much. And like, I had never had a job before, so I was just like so excited that I didn't see what was going on at the time. But yeah, it was a tough time for the studio economically.
Yeah.
A lot of people left one by one. And then Syndicate was released. And then after that, I started working on Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, together with Joseph.
And was
But
that your first experience with Joseph?
oh yeah, yeah. It was a
We're gonna
very,
talk
very.
about Joseph later on. Like, we've already received 3 questions about Joseph.
Oh yeah. I worked with him for 8 years, so I can tell you a lot of funny things. Yes.
Okay, and then before we start like going deeper into your career and how did
Mhm.
you started working bigger games and stuff like that,
Yeah.
what would you say is the biggest misconception about working in the games industry?
I think there are several. I'd say the one of the ones I notice when I look at people commenting, like people who are very invested in reading about game journalism or stuff like that, is that you know let's see, which one should I pick first? So there's so many. I think the first one is that people seem to think that game development is like developing a car. You have a very specific process, and then you kind of iterate on that process, and everything is very carefully planned and thought out. And in reality, especially when you're making games that I've been involved with, which is a little bit sort of new and unique, it's a lot more chaotic and a lot more like, okay, we have to figure things out on the spot. Um, and so that's sort of the sort of impression I get when I read about what people think the process is like, is that everything is very, since it's a professional studio with a lot of money, everybody knows exactly, and everything is done through some sort of testing or science or whatever. And that's not, doesn't always apply when you have a strictly creative job. That
Yeah.
nobody has really done this before, so we don't really know what's going to work, both from sort of a process, like how do we build this thing, and also what actually players reactions. Are they going to like this, or will they understand what we were trying to convey here? So yeah, I'd say
and
we're
there
a
was
lot
something,
less professional than you might think.
and that was something that I really enjoyed when we were playing A Way Out
Yeah.
together. And was that whole thing of, and that's something you get when you're trying demos with developers. And it's the whole looking over your shoulder, seeing if you react how you expect us to react to a specific scene or to a specific mechanic of the game. And that's from the point of view of who's playing the demo, it's really interesting. But I'm guessing for you, it's like it's almost thrilling to see if what we've worked for throughout these years, are they reacting the way I would have wanted to react them.
So that part is both, great and terrifying. I mean, during the development of a game, you usually have a lot of tests where you kind of basically put person in a couch and we're filming them, or maybe even sometimes sitting behind, watching their reactions, and then like, do they understand that, or do they enjoy that, or so you most of the time you kind of know already how most people will react when a game comes out. Problem is, this is also a common misconception among people who have never made a game before. They seem to think that you can, like, that the game itself is much more stable than it actually is. There are productions where like a game is not fully playable from start to finish until maybe 3-4 months before release.
No way.
That is not uncommon. I'm not kidding you. You can play bits and pieces, of course, but never like in one go. That is not always an easy thing to achieve, especially if you're a big studio with cutting edge technology, or you're making a new game. So even if sort of I've gathered data and I kind of seen a lot of people playing a certain level, there might not even be enough time for me to do something about that. So sometimes I sit and watch with horror because I know, shit, this scene I did not manage to get it right, and there was nothing I could do. But it is what it is. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. Like I got it right the first time. Everything has been super smooth. So it's very up and down. And I think people don't always realize that it's a lot, depending on technology, depending on project, but sometimes it's a lot tougher and a lot more chaotic than you might think.
And then how would you compare like or how does it, what's the biggest difference between working in games like A Way Out or Mirror's Edge that are grander in the scheme of things versus something like Brothers or even Syndicate?
So I think I would put Syndicate and Mirror's Edge in the same basket.
Okay.
So that is basically based on how many people, and also company culture. So in bigger games, obviously you have like a more narrow responsibility. You're working with a specific thing, and that is good for some, great for some people, and really bad for some people. You have people who really like to become extreme experts in a very specific thing. And if the corporate culture is right, you will find people, really empowered by that.
Okay.
If or it could also be the complete opposite, where okay, you feel like this small cog, and you sort of you speak up and you say, can't we do it this way? This is going to be much easier and much better. People say, yeah, sure, and then nothing happens. In Brothers, which is far smaller, we were like probably 10, 12 people. If somebody comes up with a good idea, we start working on it right away, like there and then. We just start building it. You don't have to convince 30 other people that this is a good thing. In a big production, it takes you sometimes feel like even if you feel like your idea is objectively better, it doesn't matter. It might be that it doesn't happen anyway. Whilst in small teams, it's much more easy for everybody to get together and then see like, this is what we want to do. And if anybody, it's much easier for anyone, even if they're not involved in the game, to kind of come with an idea, and everybody hears it right away and pick it up and start building. So I think the big thing is with small teams is that you can change and change something if it doesn't work very quickly.
And then do you think that type of culture starts from the top? Like, I mean, do you think it's more related to the size of the team or the people that are on top of the team?
Okay, so I've been super fortunate to see that happen. How does a company culture happen? Because we started Hazelight, which is now, I don't know exactly, maybe 65, 70 people. And I was,
Oh, wow. The last time I talked to you was like half
yeah,
of that. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. Things are going well. Yeah. And I was there from the beginning. So my impression is that it's a combination of what you mentioned. I think it does not have to do with the people at top. It's much more about the group itself. So when we worked on our way out, we sort of by itself, just by the combination of the group that we were in the beginning, started forming a certain kind of culture and a certain way of solving problems. And then as the company grew, some of those concepts or ideas, followed along, and then some of those things, kind of went away. Um, and I wouldn't say that the people in charge necessarily have super much influence, because you have formal and informal leaders, right? And it's not always the people in the top that will influence how you work. It's a little bit more complex than that. I've realized.
Yeah.
It depends a lot about, like, you have some really outspoken people, or very strong opinion people who will always speak up, and they will always have a certain influence regardless of who is in charge. So I think it's a combination, and I think those beginning, like the first couple of years when you're forming the game together, how you solve problems then and there, and how how you relate to each other both at work and outside of work has the greatest influence, because that sort of follows through and shapes the company, and everybody who comes in after that will sort of get a little bit of that. And it's clear also when at Hazelight now, when we hire people from other studios, maybe they only worked at one studio before, they come in and you can clearly see that their way of solving things and thinking is clearly affected by where they came from.
Yeah.
So it's much more complex. It's like,
And even like I'm guessing at some point it's even great what you've gone through since you've grown with the company, and that way I'm guessing like the missions and the ethics of the company has grown with you, so you kind of know how to deal with the whole thing.
yeah, sure. I mean, I've been lucky in a way that probably influenced a lot on how we should do things, and
That's so cool.
yeah. It's great. Like, I mean, one example would be that my job title is lead level designer, so I'm in charge of delegating a lot of tasks on the levels that we need to do, and sort of make sure that everybody's happy, and also building a lot of levels myself. But one thing that I've brought with me from the beginning is like, okay, yes, my job title is lead level designer or level designer, but I want all the designers to also know programming, for example,
Okay.
or like take ownership of the ideas that we do.
Okay.
So things like that is something that I've been able to influence, and the people who designers who have come into the design team in the beginning were also extremely driven and wanted to do all the cool ideas and be able to build them themselves, and were ready, willing to take that responsibility, and that sort of has shaped how the design team now works.
Okay.
Which is quite uncommon to program as much as we do while also building levels. So you kind of, as a designer, then you kind of carry the idea. You don't just come up with the idea; you actually code it, you test it out, you prototype.
That's crazy.
Okay, this is cool. Let's make that. And sometimes you need a system that is far more complex than you're capable of. But of course, we have programmers as well who can help out with that part. So that's like one example where, like, I think the me and also the designers in the beginning had a very strong vision of how we wanted to do things, and it's sort of how that sort of been carried through. Now we are a much larger team, but the ideas and the way we solve things is still the same.
Okay, and I really want to go and talk about what you're working right now, both in Hazelight and in your own personal project.
Yeah.
But before I jump to that, I know that you have described this to me in the past, but I want the chat to understand
Mhm.
what does your job entail.
Yes. So level designer, that so this is basically the person who is responsible for the gameplay experience. I think the easiest thing is to say we all probably have played Counter-Strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you would imagine you had one guy called game designer who would be like, okay, so we're going to make this game about terrorists and counter-terrorists, and there's going to be weapons, and there's going to be the system for buying and selling weapons, and you get money when you shoot somebody, and it's rounds and blah blah blah. So the designer would sort of describe the overall kind of systems and how everything is supposed to work, and then you have the programmers who implement that logically, and the level designers will be the ones who build the DE dust or the levels in the game. So the level designer's job is basically to use the what you call the core game mechanics, which in Counter-Strike is the weapons and the first person and the rounds and everything, and we put that into a scene or a context where you as a player can sort of experience that. And then of course you have artists who also are very much involved in that, but the level designer comes at it from sort of the player's perspective and goes, okay, we need to create the route so there are different types of combat, close quarters, or we want a sniper position over here. And then together with the artist who is more specialized in just making everything pretty, you kind of create a level that is both beautiful and sort of makes sense from an artistic perspective, but also has the strict requirements that a good Counter-Strike level needs.
And then
And
is tutorializing part of it?
it could be, yes. It's I have to say that level designer is one of those jobs that differ a little bit depending on what game you're making.
Okay.
But definitely, I would say tutorial is something that the level designer and the game designer would sort of collaborate on. Like, okay, we have all these mechanics. When does it make sense to teach them? How are we going to teach them?
Yeah.
That is definitely, I'd say most of the time, a designer's job.
Because that's something that I've grown like really appreciative of the way a game can design and almost hide the way it's teaching you how to play.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of value behind that.
Yes.
We were recently talking about games like, for instance, The Last of Us, and there's like a specific scene in that game where they're teaching you how to use a sniper rifle, but it's disguised as a story element.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about that because I feel that level design has a lot to do on teaching the player what to expect when they're playing the game.
Yeah, it's true. So in a game, I don't know exactly how they collaborate at Naughty Dog, but in Hazelight, where I work, we basically split the game into chunks. So you're responsible for a certain part of the game, and sort of we have a talk about what story is going to be there, and if there is a mechanic like that, we sit down and go, okay, so the player obviously need to know how to aim with a sniper rifle, and you sort of have a serious discussion about how do we teach other things in the game. Can we use some of that style or language, because that's also very different. Some games are very like, okay, pause the game, show a prompt, all that stuff, because that's how that game does it. And then you have A Way Out or Last of Us, which is much more trying to hide as much as possible. So you create and these things are like very sometimes you have to try out a lot of different things before getting it right. That's where having playtesting is very important. If you remember in A Way Out, we have these scenes where we pause the game and the players need to agree on whether we should take left or right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, how do we show that to the players? How can we make them understand that they need to agree and press the same thing at the same time? These things takes a lot of time to kind of, you had several different ways of displaying that GUI before we kind of got it to this point where it felt intuitive for most people. because very often it's very easy to kind of like, okay, I think this is intuitive, but you're never sure if it's intuitive to you. Like
Yeah.
how, and that's really hard. And I think an experienced designer kind of learns that just because, don't use yourselves necessarily as a reference, but kind of first off, look at other games that do something similar. Can we steal some good ideas? If not, okay, I think this is a good idea. And then you just have to like, okay, are there other ideas? And you sit down and talk about it a lot. And then you try a few other examples. But I remember that, like, if you call it mechanic, that GUI or how that's going to work, that was a lot of work just to make that become natural for the players.
And you guys did a great job on doing that in A Way Out. We actually did like almost a whole playthrough with Philip, who is actually producing this segment.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every scene has a new mechanic of some sort, like from fishing to playing catch. You know what I mean? And the way the game introduces these mechanics and lets you as a player discover them, it's really smart. And I love how the game never treats you, because I hate when games assume you're stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And they like overly explain something. And this
Mm.
game treats you with respect and treats the player with respect, and
Oh, yeah,
it's really
nice.
rewarding, and it feels like basically what I'm trying to say is everything that you've spoken to, it shows in the game.
Mm.
So congrats on
Yeah.
that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, but I think coming up with these things is one of the hard things as a game designer, and
Yeah,
requires you have to sit down and iterate over and over and over. And it's interesting you mentioned the fact that some games are a little bit too in your face,
yeah.
too easy or too explanatory, and I happen to know. I think I know why that is, because I can clearly see that we have when you have playtests and you've seen 50 to 100 people. There are a lot of people who don't more people than you think don't understand things.
Okay.
And then especially if you make a game that's supposed to be played by
Oh, se le cayó la llamada a nuestro amigo Philip.
oh, did I
I
lose
think
you?
he's back. Are you back?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you though, but I can hear
Oh dear. Okay,
you. No worries. No
turn
worries.
the camera. What happened? I just was talking. Okay.
There you go.
How is it like I didn't touch anything? Okay.
Okay, you were
So
talking
where was
about
I?
how when you do playtest, more
Yes,
people than you would think
exactly.
actually don't
So
understand what you're doing.
yes, so especially if you make a game that's supposed to be played by millions and millions of people, so this is going to be a huge title, and you watch so many playtests, and more people than you think will not understand, even if you feel like, come on, I'm basically spelling it out in your face. You can have an icon on the screen telling the players what to do, and they will not press the button, and you go, okay, Jesus Christ. And you move it closer and closer to the middle of the screen. And eventually they will okay, now they understand. And I think it's just that kind of fear as a developer. Like
Yeah,
I want every single player to understand. I don't want to have a problem with this in the playtest. And then sometimes you kind of fall for that thing where like, okay, maybe it's easier just to shove it in their face, pause the game, put up a huge text, uh, and display that. And that's sort of sometimes the easy way around that problem.
but that also talks about how many bold decisions you guys took with A Way Out.
Yeah, it
You know
was
what I mean?
ballsy. Yeah.
So right now you're with Hazelight, and your
Mhm.
guys are working now in a new game called It Takes Two.
Yes.
I want you to talk a little bit, or anything you can tell us about the game or the development of the
Yeah.
game. But before that,
Hmm.
I want to ask the question that everyone's trying to ask, and that's
Okay.
how is it working with Joseph Fares? And for context, como para contexto, para la gente que no sabe de qué estamos hablando, Joseph es el director de A Way Out, que es el juego del que estamos hablando, y es un personaje. Él es famoso por un quote que es "Fuck Oscars", que se dijo durante unos Game Awards, y se ha vuelto como un director afamado dentro de la industria. So yeah, like I've always I admire the guy. I think his genius is part of his personality. You know what I mean? But and how is it working with someone like that? That's I'm guessing like really frenetic and and very expressive and very passionate. Like how's working with that kind of energy?
It's it's very interesting. No, so now that we've been working together for a long time, you sort of you build like sort of that bond and trust and understanding. And I think that fuck the Oscars thing, to me, who sees him every day, he's very present at the studio. To me, it's like, why is everybody reacting? I mean, that's how, like, I'm so used to that kind of those kind of things. So for me, it was just like hilarious. I laughed so much when I saw it, and people's reactions I thought was really funny. But yeah, that is a little bit who he is sometimes. When he gets really excited about something, he becomes like that. I have one funny anecdote actually, from Brothers A Tale of Two Sons. He came up with, I don't know if I should spoil the game. It's kind of old though. Can I spoil the game?
You can spoil the game.
The mechanic. Okay, I can say it like this. So there's a very specific thing in the ending that everybody's talking about, and that's why people kind of appreciate the game.
Yes.
He did not know this. He did not come up with this idea immediately. We had worked on the game for a while, and then one night he came up with this idea of how to tie everything together in this beautiful kind of thing. And he came to the office that morning, and he looked like a wreck. Like, he was totally distraught, like black under his eyes, but because he had obviously not slept the whole night. He was so excited. And he just like, everybody get in the room now. I have something to talk about. And we're like, oh shit, what happened? He looks very happy, but also kind of tired. What's going on? And and this has actually happened a lot of times. Like, he could be super excited and come up with his idea. And, he's explaining the whole thing. And we're all just sitting like this. Just like lean back, very focused.
Like, what now?
and just like, he explains the idea, and then he's quiet and he waits for a reaction, but he doesn't get anything, because we're all like thinking about, this is great idea. Is there any way this idea does not work? You're like, because as a game designer, you kind of have to look at all the angles. Is there any reason for this particular idea? Is there like a corner case? Is there like, what if the player does this? What if the player does that? Will they understand it? Will they not? And so like the first reaction is always that, and he gets like, it got like really like, what? You don't like the idea? And we're like, no, just give me 5 seconds to think if there's any reason why we can't do this, basically. So he's usually the idea guy. But as the games have gone bigger, like A Way Out, for example, it was a bit more that he would come up with a script, the storyboard. He works a lot like you would do in the movies with storyboards and all that stuff. So that was already there day one.
I've seen the storyboards of A Way Out. They're amazing.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. And you could even see, and I think that's amazing looking back, some of those shots, like pictures in that storyboard, it's almost framed exactly as in the game. And that is not necessarily intentional. It's just like, I don't know if the images got ingrained in us, or probably the artist who made them had a great eye for detail and composition. We just ended up doing some scenes exactly like those pictures. But then anyway, so he's sort of going through like, these are the story beats that are really important. We have this torture scene here and blah blah blah, and then they go and see this guy in the mansion and whatever, and he tells it as a story. And then we have a second sit down going, okay, how do we break each of these images into sort of gameplay, and what's supposed to be gameplay and what has to be a cutscene? Or can we do sort of a blend of the two? And we sort of sit down and kind of like, okay, so we're gonna have this chase. What can we do in this chase? So in A Way Out, for example, we have one chase which is on a construction site, where we kind of go split screen all the time. So you're basically chasing the same guy simultaneously. And then in another part of the game, you're playing full screen. So the camera is sort of very cinematic, sort of a non-cut camera flying through this hospital, and you first following one player and then kind of switch over to the other player. And those ideas happen in those meetings, where we're like, okay, we have two chases. Like, okay, we made this chase scene in the construction site. That was kind of cool, but we can't do the same thing. what can we do? And then somebody has a great idea, and that person kind of like, all right, you build a prototype. So that it's funny because that particular scene with the hospital chase that most people mention, it was actually made by an intern. He had worked
No way.
at a studio for 2 or 3 months. I was actually on vacation in New York, came back, and he had this prototype of the scene. I'm like, holy shit! I was excited and also scared from a production perspective. Like, it looks amazing, but how the hell are we gonna do this? But it turned out great. So how it is to work with him? He like I said, he can sometimes get overexcited, and you know, he is like that. It's not a persona. He is like, fuck the Oscars. That is Joseph sometimes, but he can also be you know, be extremely professional. He's the best person I've ever met when making deals, business deals. Whew, you don't want to sit on the other table with him. He always gets his ways. So yeah, he's a very good business person, but and so he can swap between the two. Like when it's serious, he can be very, very serious, and then he can also be this super creative guy. And you know, best advice is just to sit back and, you know, don't overreact. Don't get freaked out.
What can you tell us about It Takes Two?
Yeah, so what I can basically
I don't want to give you like
it's-
questions because I don't know specifics, and I don't want to like.
Yeah, we've just shown the teaser.
Yes.
That was quite recently, and of course we're preparing to show more at a later date. But It Takes Two is a co-op platforming game. It's also split screen, just the way A Way Out was. And you play this game together, and you take you play the characters Cody and May, the father and mother of a daughter, Rose, who are about to separate. That's sort of the premise of the story. And then you have this crazy adventure together. I'm not sure I can say more than that. We just mentioned
that's perfect. That's perfect.
that's basically it.
We're showing the teaser right now, so people are actually watching the
Oh,
teaser as you speak. And would you say that the expectations of any games you do now, specifically this one, that has Joseph so attached to it because it's like basically in the teaser, are you guys aware and or afraid of the expectations people may have for the game?
Yeah, I think most people at the studio feel really empowered. Like
That's so
that,
cool.
the game it has been or still is amazing to work on. It's quite different from A Way Out, since A Way Out is much more realistic.
Yeah.
This is more of a platformer. I am sort of both scared and really excited because like platforming games, they are, you know, a lot more of a creative challenge in a way. Like, because since there is nothing that you know, you can make anything make sense. You know, you can be as crazy as you want to be. That means that if you make a boring game, then you're a bad designer, right? Because there's nothing holding you back. So that's the scary part for me. But so far so good. The test we've had shows that people really enjoy it. So it's, you know, when I work on games, I don't really I try to ignore other people's expectations. It's like me and it's like my family, my studio, and we make this thing together. And if other people enjoy it, that's great, but that's not why I make games. I do it for myself, and I would still be in the business even if nobody played my games. And that's sort of a way for me to kind of cope with these things, especially when, you know, something you make gets a negative response. I try to sort of go, yeah, but
But it was fun doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
yeah, I had a great time. If people don't like it, that's not my problem. I learned so much. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, like I mean, I totally get that. We've done several like short films and stuff like that, and I am aware of how bad or good they are. But what I take from them is the experience of making them.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some movies that we've done that I absolutely love, but it's not about the actual product, it's about the experience I had while doing it. Exactly. And I think that looking at stuff that way actually makes you thrive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've worked on games that I'm not super happy with, but I still, I pick some things from that experience and kind of go, okay, I learned these things there, and that time was definitely worth it for me, even
Yeah.
though the game didn't score or whatever, score high on Metacritic or whatever. It's a funny thing. Game developers are obsessed about Metacritic,
Yeah.
and most people now are like, "What is Metacritic?" It's like, it's the Bible, man. It's the Bible.
Okay, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, we've almost run out of time.
Oh,
And I
really?
do,
Jeez.
yeah, and I do want to get some of their questions in. But
Okay.
before that, I want to talk about your game. I want you to explain what you're working in so people know about the game. I understand it's a free to play game, right?
Right now it is, yes.
Yeah. And then but you also
Yeah.
have a Discord channel for it, and you have a
Yep.
website up, and
Yep.
I want you it's a two-part question. First of all is what's the game, what's the inspiration behind the game, and then you are doing this by yourself,
Mhm.
so how has that experience been, and has it been as hard as you thought it would be? Like, I mean, how is I've always wondered, like, I mean, taking, and I've seen what you're doing. It's like
Mm.
an amazing work, and it's all done by yourself, like from the art to the directing to the script to the level design,
Yeah.
everything. So let's
Mm.
just talk about the game. What's the game, and then how has been the experience of developing the
Yep.
game?
Yes. So the game I'm working on is called. So this is my private kind of thing I'm doing on the side. It's called Hyperspace Pirates of Atira. It's a first-person co-op multiplayer game where you play together with your friends as a crew on a spaceship. So you run around inside the spaceship. You can walk up to the pilot seat and you can fly it, and then you see it as sort of a third-person kind of arcadey palette kind of thing. You can walk up to the engineer panel, boom, you get like a top down view of all the components that are active, turn things on and off. Um, and everything is like the ship is sort of physically kind of simulated in the way that the engines can break down, and then you can't, you can't fly forward. You need to run back to the engines and kind of repair them manually. So the game is all about you and your friends sitting together and, operating this complex machine together. And it's basically, to describe it short, I would say, it's like the ultimate Han Solo Chewbacca experience. You play the heroes in this universe, and you fly this amazing vehicle, and you upgrade it, and you keep it alive, and you try to stay alive, being hunted by the evil Federation. Um, so yeah, and then there is a story element to it as well. Tell the story like, it if you played Max Payne series, you have this comic strip kind of way of telling the story. You play the game in campaigns, pretty much like, Left 4 Dead. You would
Okay.
like play a session like one or a couple of hours. So you play like one campaign together with your friends over an evening, for example. That's the format. Then there are different campaigns. Um, with different ships, different crews, different stories, but still within the same universe. And the idea is that it's all replayable. Like the challenges are not the same, just like in Left 4 Dead. Uh, the idea is that the game will, once it's finished, gonna be a tight experience where we randomize a lot of things, so you'll never feel like it's the same experience, and you want to play the same story over and over. Yeah,
And
that's the quick pitch.
how overwhelming has it been?
Oh, yeah. So
Because I
yeah.
remember when I was researching about you
Mm.
2 years ago, when
Mhm.
we had the chance to talk about A Way Out. You were back then. You were already working in like concept art for this game.
Oh yeah, it was far. Yeah, I've been working on it for many, many years. It's far more than 2 years. I'd say I don't dare to say the full number. Maybe it's more than 5, less than 10.
So
um,
9.
yeah, it's been a hobby project, so it's never really. It's more. It started off as being much simpler than this. So it's been, um, you would only see like a flat screen. So, if you were the pilot, you would just see the ship. You couldn't leave the pilot seat. You would just see the ship. And then they would have the person controlling the electronics or the engineer stuff. He would only see that screen and only be able to manipulate the power. And that's how it started. Like much easier game to make. No 3D, no running around first person stuff at all. Um, but I've always had the drive to learn more about the things I don't sit down and do day to day. You know, I never done networking, programming, or fully proper art things. So it was a way for me to sort of explore the sort of the full experience of being a game developer, and more fully understand what the programmers were doing, because they kept saying all my ideas were shitty at work, or how I wouldn't understand why everything was impossible. I'm like, okay, screw you, I'm going to learn programming so I can prove that you're all wrong, right? um and the same with art, like learning to do art properly helps me so much, being able to communicate and sort of be there with the artist and not come up with things that would ruin their work. So it was more about like getting better at other things, and understand my colleagues a lot better, and then sort of the project grew with my skills as well. I did not expect at all to kind of like, oh wait, it actually isn't that hard to learn all these things. I mean, yes, you need time, of course, but as sort of I realized that I was capable of doing all these things, I also decided, I screw it, like let's just be able to walk around first person. How bad can it get? And then I've taken it more as sort of a toy I played around with. Like I never took it super seriously until maybe 1 year ago. That's when I felt like, hey, dude, I can play around and do all these stupid experiments, or I could actually turn this into something that's a bit more commercial, let's say. And so I took that step and put up the website and started promoting it properly.
Yeah.
And now I've sort of released what I called Alpha 1. That was earlier this year. And now I'm pretty close to releasing Alpha 2. But right now the game is still like very, very early. So it's going to be a while until it's a full experience where all these things I've been talking about feels proper and in place.
But congratulations on that. I mean,
Yeah,
I've looked a
great.
lot into it, and it looks amazing. It
Yeah,
looks
yeah.
really fun.
Thank
Right
you.
now, I think everyone is um, looking for co-op games and co-op
Mhm.
opportunities, and
Yeah.
this feels like perfect fit for
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yes. I mean, if you're into games like Left 4 Dead, or maybe even Payday, yes, they are very sort of twitchy shooters. This is not that, but a lot of large scale things are in that vein. Supposed to be like the thing you come home from work and you just want to have a chill night with your friends, have a beer and play together for a couple of hours. Then I think this game is gonna be great.
We are actually showing some of the game right now,
Oh,
and
okay.
I wanted to read you some of the things people are saying, just
All
so
right.
that you get some feedback right now.
Cool.
They're saying stuff like it looks amazing, it looks like Star Wars. So that whole thing that
Yeah.
you were saying, like about Chewie, it
Oh,
actually
that's the
pays
best.
through.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
they say that it reminds them a little bit of like Star Citizen, or maybe even Rogue
Mm,
Squadron. I don't know if those two might
yes.
be good comparisons.
See.
Um, yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that are saying. So I mean, everything that you want people to feel about the game, I think that what we're
Yeah.
showing right now actually translates.
Star Citizen is a little bit scary because that's an enormous game. This is not gonna be. I mean, I take that as a very kind compliment, but don't
Yeah,
expect an
yeah,
MMO where you can meet other players. This is supposed to be you and your friends. You cannot
yeah,
meet
yeah,
other.
yeah, definitely.
But I mean, I really appreciate people looking at my game and go, "Oh, yeah, Star Citizen," because Star Citizen that's a big game. And
Okay,
here
let me
I am in
see
my attic.
from my questions. There's one topic that I wanted to talk to you about before we would
All right.
jump to something else. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to their questions to see if we can get
Sure.
them through. And if we can come back to this, we'll come back to this. And if not, we'll just leave it at that. Um, so right now I have, okay, what do you think it's necessary to be a good game developer? Like, what quality do you think you have to have?
Yes. So I think number one is to be patient with yourself. Learning game development is like learning any other craft, arts or whatever. It just takes so much practice, and I see a lot of people getting intimidated. Looking at whatever big game is out there and go, I can never do that, and then they panic and just like leave it. They just open the editor, don't understand it, they just leave it. And you have to, I think for me, the best advice could be like, you have to have patience with yourself and go like, you will not, this is not something quick and easy. Becoming a good developer takes many, many, many years. And also try to see, instead of looking at, comparing yourself with something that's, made by somebody far more experienced, look at how much better your work is today compared to the work you did yesterday, and just
Okay.
be excited by your own progress. And that's sort of how you cope with working on a project for 8 years in your basement kind of thing. And I think that's the best quality, just being patient with yourself, and kind of only like really try to look at your achievements along the way, and sort of, yeah, the mistakes, sure, learn from them, but don't let them
Consume you.
overwhelm you. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think that's great advice, and not only for game development, like for
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, I guess it's life, in general, but but it's very
Okay, they
true for
have
game development.
taking. Okay, so Sweden is a country that has a lot of like studios, both big and small.
Mhm.
Is there a lot of collaboration between the studios, or is it more of a competition?
Absolutely not competition. I think sort of semi-officially we're all cheering on each other. Collaboration, like actual collaboration, as in we're sharing, scripts or,
Engines.
or
Yeah.
stuff. We don't do that. That is, there are a million reasons for that. I would say the biggest one is that we all have publishers, right? We're all financed by big companies, and they have their own laws and rules, and they don't, they just can't allow people to just share stuff to left and right. There are some very few exceptions. But with that said, we have things like GDC, Game Developers Conference, which is, I the it's like game developers mecca.
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
all experienced game devs go there every year, and the atmosphere is extremely open, and everybody's very honest, and sharing experiences and going out having a beer, talking about a project is okay. But uh, that's as far as the collaboration goes. We kind of have to have that sort of barrier in between. We cannot share any secrets with anybody or like that.
But
But we're
there's a
all
good
cheering on each
relationship.
other.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, super positive.
Okay. How much time did it took to make a game like A Way Out?
A Way Out. I think that was a little bit over 3 years. It was a very big and ambitious project. We were just starting up a company and so on. And the game itself was a little bit different from what anybody of us had done at the time. So it took a bit longer than I think you would think if you just looked at it. But A Way Out, that was a little bit over 3 years. Brothers, that was not 2 years, but almost.
Okay.
Um, but it varies a lot. Like some games you wouldn't expect have been like in production for 7 years, and you're like, what? Because they, sometimes,
Like like Hyperspace Pirates of Atira, for instance.
yeah, yeah, that's just the result of me sitting by myself. But there are a million reasons. It could be like I start in one direction and go
Yeah,
5 years
yeah, that
down the line,
happens.
I go, screw that, I have to do something else, which happens with big projects too.
With the amount of good studios that you have in Sweden,
Mm.
what do you think is the key for a country to have so much talent and good studios between it? Like, do you think there's something
I know.
specific about the
Yes.
culture of Sweden? Okay, let me.
Definitely. I know, and I'm gonna get a little bit political here, but I know there's one key, and that is actually free education. The fact that here in Sweden, regardless of your background, you can go and study these things for free. It doesn't cost you anything. I think is a huge thing. So because the mentality, like for me, for example, if it would have cost me money to study game development, I probably wouldn't have done it. Even though I had talent for it, even though I loved it, I would see it as like, taking this huge loan, study this thing for 3 years, and what if it doesn't go well?
Yeah,
I would probably make my bet and do engineering instead, because I knew like there's Volvo and all these things here in Sweden that would be a lot safer. And I know that was the key to kind of like once there was some money coming into the industry we could hire students, and there was like this input of people not only from outside of Sweden, but also a lot of really good students. So I would say that is a big factor. And the other factor is a great system we have here in Sweden, which is which I just mentioned before, the vocational school system, where you can apply to the government to get paid for a certain education. You basically pitch, like, this is the education I want to supply people to
That's
this
so
type of
crazy,
industry.
dude.
And they'll be like, yes, we'll give you the money, but only if you can put 80% of all the students into work. So they put all the responsibility onto the school. And I don't know if I can swear, but holy shit.
You can
what a
swear
big
all you
difference.
want. I mean, I want to swear because of our education system.
Yeah, I understand that. So I think that's it, and here also, even if you're older, we have some people in the studio who decided they were like, 33 and decided like, shit, I've been doing this boring job my whole life. I need to do something else. The step to kind of pivot and do something else is not, you're not stuck in one career just because you started off that way when you were 20. And I think, honestly, that is the key.
Yeah.
Then we have another thing which sort of goes in tandem with that. That's helped some really amazing studios, like the Coffee Stain, for example, the ones who made Goat Simulator and Satisfactory. And what happened there is that at the university I studied in, called the University of Skövde, which is a city, they also had plugged in. Not only was, of course, all the education for free, but then they also had a company incubator. So, like, next to the school, there was like, hey, if you have an idea and want to start a company, we will help you with that. We'll give you the offices you need for an extremely low fee. We have people who has contacts within the game industry who can, put you together with, people with money, with publishers. And so, you made it very easy for people, young, ambitious people, to kind of get going and focus on what they're good at, which is making games. And I'd say, many of those times, it doesn't work out, but they learn a lot, and then they can apply to a larger studio. And sometimes, like in Coffee Stain's case, and there are a lot of other examples there, they just make so much money and become super popular, and nobody would even think of, giving them a chance unless it was for the fact that there was this incubator plugged into the university, basically. So you would take like an extra year where you would study business, and they will kind of apply all the stuff you learn directly into the company you're making at the same time. And that is like, we don't have that in Stockholm. It was only there, but holy shit, that is like the best.
That's amazing. Yes.
Ever.
They just said something in the chat that I think it's a great way to close this whole thing, and it's like, how a government, like how people in power of the actual government of a country actually ends up unlocking a lot of talent just by allowing people to actually discover what they want to do and support what they want to do.
Yeah, I would almost argue that is more important than healthcare. I know that because if you're putting more effort into education, at least the generation after you will fix the problems that made you not being able to fix the healthcare. You know what I mean? So
I agree.
For me, that's like,
no, we've been having discussions in our country for a while about how they're trying to fix a lot of stuff up here, but they don't understand that you first have to fix education, and that'll fix everything down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a great way to end this panel. We could talk for hours. Like, I still have like 10 questions, and there's a couple of questions of the chat that I didn't get a chance to share with you. So hopefully we get a chance to do this again down the line. Maybe
when we're call, man.
Maybe when we're closer to your game to be out, or maybe for It Takes Two, and we can have another chat. People have really enjoyed, and I know that you're really appreciated of what you've been doing, and you donating your time to this idea we had a couple of months ago. So thank you for that. It has been great. It has been really, really good. And thank you for being here again. And we wish you the best with everything you're doing, especially with your game.
Yeah. Hang in there, guys. I hope take care of each other, and I hope you get out of your tough situation you have there in Panama.
Yeah, we will. We will.
Yeah.
And then People are already sharing your Discord on the chat, so you'll
Oh,
receive
yeah,
a
of
couple
course.
of Panamanians on your Discord.
Oh, you're all welcome. You're all welcome. I
Okay.
could actually be there chatting with you guys if you have any questions after this as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
I've seen.
I'm always
Actually, Philip
available.
is really active with his community, so go there.
Yeah.
Zeta, ayúdame con el rate, porfa, que estoy como complicado acá con este tema. Nuevamente, gracias a todos por acompañarnos en este panel. Recuerden que en un par de horas tenemos otro panel con Felix Kramer, que está más inclinado hacia la producción de juegos independientes, pero sumamente interesante todo lo que ha hecho él en su carrera. Así que vamos ahorita a donde Alex, después vamos a pasarnos por donde Lemoski, y Lemoski nos va a tirar para el último panel del evento, que va a ser con Felix Kramer. We're just rating another channel, so thank you again for everything, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, see you, bye.
Cool. Let's go to Alex then. Filip, puedes pasar a la tapa aquí.